South Africa belongs to all who live in it. United in our diversity, those famous words are in the preamble to the Constitution, but Sorbet founder Fuhr is an opinion piece, argues nothing can be further from the truth. He says decades of apartheid means the country belongs to the privileged few, divided by diversity. Fuhr is calling for massive concerted efforts of racial healing. The entrepreneur joins us now virtually to discuss this further. Good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us here on the South African Morning. Now, South Africa has a dark, a very complex and unjust past. And, you know, we always having conversations around if there's been any progress in this regard, and there's varying opinions. But I think first, let's just start by unpacking the concept of racial healing and what it truly means.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. You know, in order to understand racial healing, you first need to understand the consequences of our past. So we need to move back into history and say, why are we actually having to deal with this right now? And after 300 years, essentially, of systemic racism and the belief that one particular group is superior to another, which started out right from the early days with the Europeans arriving in South Africa with a very dominant attitude that said people of color did not deserve equal treatment because they were inferior. And then all through the years, ending in apartheid, we actually legislated that superiority. So in order to be able to address the problems that we face today, we need to understand the psychological damage that this particular notion has created, the superiority and inferiority. And Steve Biko said, after 300 years of being told that you're inferior, you actually start to believe it. And I can actually vouch for that in the workplace, in my work as a coach and a consultant, that there are many people today who are still suffering, particularly black people, from what I call the imposter syndrome, where they don't believe that they actually deserve the positions that they hold, and that they're only there because of black economic power. So we have to go back a little bit and relearn our history. But in order to understand the need for healing, we first have to say, okay, how do we repair the damage? Firstly, how do we restore people to wholeness and acknowledge the truth of our past?
But Ian, that damage runs so deep and it's so compounded. You know, there's not an easy solution. This was obviously damage that occurred, you know, over years. And some people have this notion, well, the past is the past. Can't we just get over it and move forward? And it's not that easy. The damage is immense. So how do we start? What sort of conversations do we need to be having? And how do we practically implement solutions and start taking steps forward?
So we have to have these very courageous conversations. And of course it is very deep. But it's much easier to move forward if you are the beneficiary of your history than it is for people who are the victims of the history. So I believe that we shouldn't be talking just yet about how we're going to move forward. We first have to say, how do we resolve the things that divide us? And so there are many people today, particularly white people, who will say, I'm not a racist, I don't see color, you know, I treat everybody the same. But obviously a black person listening to that says, well, what do you mean you don't see color? You know, my whole life has been determined by my color, and you're just completely undermining my own life experience. So please don't treat me the same, because I'm actually not the same. So we have to have these really difficult conversations, and it requires a bit of bravery. But the first thing is to know your own racial identity, right? You need to know that, you need to understand it, you need to discover why you have the problem. How did you create the biases with which you live every day? What did you learn about race when you were younger? We need to re-educate ourselves about our history and understand the extent of the discrimination and the unfairness and the injustices. We can't just, there are so many people that just don't really know our history properly. They have a vague understanding, but they don't realize the extent of the damage. So it makes it very difficult for them to try and move forward, because they're saying, what's the problem now? Now it's about reverse racism. So, so that in itself is another challenge. There are so many challenges that, yes, sorry.
No, you can continue making your point, Ian.
Sorry. So there are so many challenges that South Africa faces. It's just enormous. But just about every single one of those challenges is touched by race in one way or another. So we just have to say, okay, it's not just about being resilient anymore. South Africans love the word resilience. We're so resilient, we can cope with virtually any problem that gets thrown at us. But rather, let's tackle the root causes of all our problems. And that is ultimately about race. So we have to rebuild the mistrust that has been broken for so many, many years. We've all taught as young people, both black and white, to be afraid of and to mistrust the other race group. And that still exists today. Anyone who believes that race is an issue of our past only is badly mistaken. It just exists all over, and it touches everything that we do.
Ian, how much of that is then psychological? How much of this is an impact and a result of the psychological impact of systemic racism, and how do we unpack that?
I think it's hugely psychological. I was running a workshop the other day, and one of the young black women said to us that her parents were so manipulated by the apartheid system that they genuinely believed that they were inferior. And the worst thing that happened was that her parents told her that she too was inferior and that she would never be able to compete equally on the level playing field because white people were fundamentally superior to her. And she broke down crying. And there are so many people who have been infected by that psychological damage. Lots of work to be done, and we need to do this across the country, not just in businesses. We need to do it in all types of organizations, in society. Everybody needs to really get a hold of how we can build this country, because I cannot conceive a country that can be rebuilt without first actually dealing with the racial polarization that holds us back so badly at the moment.
What is the first step then Ian, in rebuilding the country and dealing with the racial polarization? How do we take that first step, and what needs to be done?
I think it all starts with you as an individual, each and every person. It's about how do we challenge our own paradigms and our mindset. So the two main things: you have to go out and educate yourself, firstly, about the need for change. And then secondly, you have to start interacting with people who are different to you. We must have these conversations. We must go out and find it. It's not going to happen by itself. If it's to be, it's up to me. In the old days, we thought we could change others. There's some ancient wisdom that says, yesterday, I thought I was clever, so I could change other people. But today, I became wise. I tried to change myself. And it starts with us, and we have to do this. So if you believe that you should be treating people the way that you would like to be treated, that's not right. We should change that. That you should treat people the way that they would like to be treated.
And it starts with us. Ian, thank you very much for your insights. It's a very complex conversation, but a vital and a very important one as well. We thank you for your insights and your time in trying to help us understand this very complex issue and how to move forward into achieving racial healing. That was Ian Fuhr, just chatting to us about racial healing, how far we've come as a country and how far we still have to go, and also how we can start implementing these changes.